Collins & Co.'s not-for-profit conference, Be Empowered Through Knowledge, is designed specifically for the not-for-profit sector. Our speakers are experts in this sector, and their practical approach provides not-for-profit board members and management with the opportunity to improve their skills and knowledge across a range of specialist topics. The conference also provides a great networking opportunity.
Thanks very much, Michael.
Thanks, Stuart. Can everyone hear me okay? Good. Stuart also forgot to mention that I'm a glutton for punishment by wanting to do 2 sessions. So very quickly, Sky's Design, as Stuart mentioned, we're a graphic design social enterprise. Our potted history is we were started by a youth service. The youth service went bankrupt and the CEO basically said, you can do what you want with it. So I shopped it around for a while, and the CEO at a group called St Kilda Community Housing agreed to take us on and keep us afloat. And so now our social enterprise model is that all of our profit returns to that organisation, to St Kilda Community Housing, and gets used wherever they need to use it in delivering affordable housing to about 340 single people around St Kilda. All of our clients are not-for-profits or for-purpose. So I don't particularly like the term not-for-profit. I don't have an issue with charity, but I don't like not-for-profit. So as much as possible, I'll use either social purpose or for-purpose organisation. And for me, that captures not only those that are registered charities or not-for-profits, but it also captures organisations that are for-profit, whose whole purpose is about trying to change the nature of society. So whether that be impact investment or social return on investment measurement, building the capacity of the sectors and the multiple sectors that we work within, I also class those organisations as social purpose. So that's just my brief introduction. And in line with that, one of the things that I think is critical in terms of organisation branding is that a lot of organisations don't really understand where brands fit. It might be a big call, I think, but what I see more and more is that brand is not considered as an integral part of an organisation's activities and their strategies. And I think that's where it needs to move to. And so through the presentation today, that's the lens that I'm going to try and look at this. I'll look at the elements of branding, and then I'll touch on the way we sort of start to work with organisations so you can get a feel for what we do. And it's a model that we've not created. It's actually a model that we inherited or brought across from marketing and advertising. Okay? And it's been used in there for about 40 years now. And the model itself has existed probably since about the 1930s, 1940s as a way of thinking. So we're going to cover off on what is a brand, why is brand important, value proposition and positioning. And we're just going to touch on that because the next session is going to be all about that. So I don't want to bore people who are sitting in both. Archetypes and also measuring brand strength. That light's annoying. So what's a brand? So there's many definitions for a brand. Okay, I don't think there's one consistent, and if you read any literature, you'll see a lot. The other thing that you'll see a lot of, if you read trade press, Pro Bono magazine, anything like that, if there's articles on brand, there's often not a definition of what they mean by a brand. And I think there's a challenge in that, because I think what it means is that a lot of organisations are left to figure out what that means. Is the brand the logo? Is the brand controlled by the style guide? Or is it bigger than that? Is it actually more integral, as I've said, and is it actually more structural within an organisation? And for my money, it's actually more structural. So a definition that I like to use is this one from Adrian Sargent. So a promise to the public that an organisation possesses certain features or will behave in certain ways. That's a fairly broad definition. Captures pretty much everything that you could do or do. Okay? I've then expanded that and this is hopefully my only little bit of egocentricity, and I put it in bold just to highlight it. So it's all of the components of your organisation that influence how you are perceived by the world that you engage with. Okay? So think for a minute about any brand that you can think of. Coca-Cola, the MCG, the AFL, take your pick. What are the elements of that organisation that make you make a decision about them? Because it's not just the logo. It's what you hear about them. It's what you know about them. It's what you see in the press about them. It's your sense of the area that they work in and where they fit within that work or within that sector. So there's a whole lot of elements that go into your perception of an organisation. Okay? And a brand is your organisation. Okay, so let's be clear on that. It's everything. If you come to me and say, I want to rebrand, the last thing I'm going to worry about is your logo. Okay? I'm going to worry about how you engage with your audience, who your audience is, what you offer them, what are you trying to say to them. What is all of that in your organisation? Okay? And what do you think internally? So do you have a consistent way of thinking and talking internally? And do you then present that externally? Okay? For me, that's what a brand is. So why is it important? Well, we know in the for-purpose sector, or in the for-profit sector, it's about generating income. Okay? It's about maximising profit, and it's about getting ahead of your competitors. In the for-purpose sector, it's designed to manage a few other things. There's less money going around the sector. Okay? There's less money for purpose, there's less money for staffing, there's less money for service delivery, there's less money being given out in philanthropy. And at the same time, there's more focus on social outcomes and the impact that you're having. Okay, we've known for a few years now that outcomes are not just how many people you help. It's how you help them. It's the stories of change that you can tell about your interactions with those people. Okay? That's what everyone wants to know. That's where the engagement is now. Okay? People are happy to know that they funded you $10,000 and you helped 50 people to go and get a Cert 3, for example. But now they want to know, what did that person do with the Cert 3? Did they go and get a job with it? Did they get a work placement? Did they slide back into whatever their previous behaviours were? Okay? That's what people are wanting to know. That is a component of what your brand now needs to be able to communicate. And we're seeing this social media change. So we've known for a long time, obviously, Facebook and Twitter and what have you. You know, they've broadened the horizon and the landscape for communication, and we've gone from one way, being brochures and websites, to two-way, being social media. But now we're going global, okay? And this is where having a democratic approach to your brand becomes critical. And what I mean by that is, if I put something on Facebook and you read it, I can't stop you doing anything with it, okay? So before I have even put the computer away, that Facebook post could be in the US or the UK or Arnhem Land. So brand is critical in making sure that who you are is translatable throughout all of that and consistent through all of that. Okay? Because you don't have the ability to control it. So the paradox in that is you have to be more controlling of who you are and how you're perceived to be able to have that freedom to let it go. Okay? And your brand is critical to build partnerships and collaboration. So more and more, we're seeing organisations being funded to create partnerships. So we did some work end of last year and some marketing planning work for 3 organisations funded under ACFI to come together and to deliver training and certificates in the city of Port Phillip. The funding was to bring those 3 organisations together so they could actually share in how they went to market to find clients and to offer their services. Okay? So it wasn't about each organisation. ACFI were actually interested in how do we build these collaborations of organisations so we can target more people and so we can actually have a better spend for our money. Okay? And brand is critical in building these partnerships and relationships. Because if you're true to your brand and you're consistent all the time, then you will build trust in people. Okay? The moment you don't do what you say you're going to do is the moment that your brand suffers a dent. And I know that because I know when I've done things that haven't actually led to what we promised, it's reverberated. Okay, we've lost a client, or that client's judgment of what we can do going forward is a little bit tarnished. Okay, so we have to be hyper vigilant around trying to deliver all the time. Okay, and it's not always going to work, but the more you can focus on it and the more you can build that consistency in the organisation, the easier it will become. So for purpose, branding needs to bring together your organisational culture and structure. It needs to bind your employees behind a common purpose. Okay? Employees in our sector, some of them are, but not all of them are motivated by their own reward. Okay? Motivated by actually what we can do differently in society. What difference can we actually make through the organisations that we work with? So a strong brand and a coherent brand allows employees to attach to that. It also allows you to go to market and look for the right people who can see that they align behind what your brand is. As I've said, it allows for collaboration. It allows you to manage complexity. If you're consistent in who and what you are and what you do and what you can do, then it allows you to strip out a whole lot of things that you don't need to do. It allows you to bind all of those things simply so you can talk about them simply as well. And it should at all times reinforce what your mission is. And the mission is absolutely critical to your brand. And we'll have a look at how we look at that that idea of mission in terms of purpose and brand. And this is how we do it. And this is probably the simplest way I could think of with my limited skills to translate this. So the mission underpins everything. The mission is about your desired world. It's your worldview. Okay? And so the question is always got to be, is it consistent with how we work today? The next part is why. So why do we exist? What are our values? Are they shared by everybody in the team? Okay? And when was the last time you actually looked at them and made an assessment of that? The who you are, that's a critical piece for us in terms of the brand and its identity, and we'll look into that a little bit more later. And as I said earlier on in the contents, we look at archetypes. That's our model for identifying who an organisation is. Those three components then will influence beneficiaries. Okay? Who are you helping, or what are you helping if you're in the environment, or as David Locke said, I think he mentioned helping frogs. And are you addressing the need in the same way consistently? It influences the programs that you deliver. And ultimately, it influences the type of impact that you're going to have, either in your community or in society more broadly. So, for example, if your attitude, your approach to purpose is about building the capacity of people, and you believe fundamentally that building someone's capacity gives them the tools to change their lives for themselves, that's a very different proposition to going in with an approach that says, actually, we're here to do that for you. Okay? The approach, the thinking might be the same, that we need to actually help people to change their own capacity, to change their own lives. But the way you deliver on that is going to be fundamentally different. The types of programs that you deliver will be different because one will be about how you do it, the other one will be about how you support them to do it. It'll also be very different in terms of how you go and talk about that. Okay? And that means that the people you're actually targeting at the end of all of your communications is going to be different. Someone who feels like they want to be involved in supporting people to change is going to be interested in a message that talks about how they can support people to change. Someone who thinks that actually change needs to be in the eyes of the person or in the hands of the person is going to be more interested in that capacity building, self-change approach. So that's how we see this model actually working within brand, that why and who and mission underpin everything else. Okay? And when those three things align, you'll get the right beneficiaries for the organisation, or the right supporters, and we will look at supporters in the next session around value propositions. But you'll bring in beneficiaries or clients who are interested in how you can help them, okay? And what difference you actually make to them, rather than you just being an organisation that does what they do. So we talk about brand integrity. And brand integrity is the combination of your identity and your image. And identity is your internal identity. It's how you think and feel and talk about yourselves internally. And your image is, does that actually relate externally? So have you actually built a relationship externally where those people are thinking the same about you as you think about you? And when those two things align, you get what's called brand integrity. You are reinforcing all the time what it is that you think you are, or who you think you are, and you're reinforcing that consistently with people in the audience who are taking that in and absorbing it and assessing you against that. And those that want to participate with you will feel alignment with that. I said that I wasn't going to talk much about proposition and positioning, so I'm pretty much going to leave it on this slide. So it's understanding who is your audience. That can be funders, local community, supporters, clients, government, doesn't matter. It's anybody who you have identified needs to be involved in your organisation. What are they trying to achieve? Okay, so it's not about you. Your value proposition is never about you. It's about who's out there that you need to bring to you. What are their challenges? How do you help them solve those challenges? So what do you do? And how do you do it? And then understanding how it's a benefit to them. Okay? And that's essentially the guts of the 45-minute session after this one. But that is what a value proposition aims to do. And brand positioning is about target audience. Does anyone know the term tribal marketing? Anyone heard that? Yeah, some have, some haven't. Okay. It's pretty straightforward. We all have tribes. They're all people who think like us, feel like us, want to be a part of us. That's your tribe. Okay. Brand positioning is about working out who that tribe is and then putting yourself in a place where you're the solution to whatever it is they're looking for. Brand clarity is about having coherent identity. Okay, so having a singular voice. Having I said earlier, brand is not just about logo and a style guide, but having consistency in your visual representation is critical to having brand coherency. Right down to the type of images you might use, the type of language you want to use. You will often get style guides that'll say, here's how you use our logo, here's the font, here's some examples of brochures, end of story. There's nothing about what voice do we use to write our brochures with, What is our attitude towards the world that we're working in, and how does that play out? If you go and have a look at some, I think I've got one on my laptop if anyone wants to see it. I've got a style guide from Mantra Apartments. It's about 14 pages long, and it's in detail around everything. So there is no risk that there's going to be any confusion about how you do Mantra branding work. Okay? It's completely and utterly controlled. And that's critical. You need to be consistent in everything that you do. If you come to me with work, or to my colleague Anna Maria up the back there, and you give us a style guide that tells us everything, you make our job so much easier. The job will go faster, it'll be closer to what it is you're looking for, because you've positioned us in how you want to be positioned. Brand clarity allows you to differentiate from other similar services. There's a uniqueness in every organisation. Having coherent identity allows you to promote that uniqueness. And being able to promote that uniqueness reinforces who you are and why people should come to partner with you. It reinforces purpose, an approach to purpose, and it streamlines marketing and fundraising. As I said earlier, marketing and fundraising is not just what brand is about, but it's where it sits in organisations at the moment. But the clearer you are about who you are and how to use your brand and how you want to be presented makes a whole lot of that easier. You can have anybody come into the organisation and give them a guide as to who you are, and they can work from that if they've got experience in comms or whatever. Okay? At the moment, we see a lot of organisations where someone comes in and that comms person has to figure out the voice. And then it's controlled by either the CEO or a marketing manager or somebody else. And if there isn't that person with that knowledge, it's left to that comms person to figure it out for themselves. And then write 10 versions of a fundraising letter till they get the voice right. Okay, so having this clarity makes a huge difference. Has everyone seen Simon Sinek's work on why? Yep. So you all know the golden circle. Does anyone not know it? A few of you? It's a really good YouTube clip to watch. It was a TED Talk, I think in 2011, maybe. And you only need to watch from 30 seconds to 1:50. I think that's what I've cut it down to as the most relevant bits. But essentially what Simon has said is that there's a core piece of communication for great communicators, great leaders, great organisations. And it's this bit in the middle. It's about why do we do what we do? Okay? It's what are our values that we bring to work? Why are we motivated by this cause? Why do we get up in the morning and come back every day to face the same stuff over and over again in the hope that in some cases we'll see incremental change in our clients? All organisations can tell you how they do stuff, the types of programs that they run, okay? And the types of people and the skills that they have in those organisations to deliver those programs. And they can tell you what the programs are. And I'd say that the for-purpose sector is much, much better at communicating why than the for-profit sector, because we're a values-driven sector. But I don't think it's as central to our communications as it needs to be. And there's a whole lot of work that's been done around values-based marketing and communications from a values perspective. And one of those things that they've identified, a group called Common Cause in the UK, is that about 75% of the population share the same set of values. Okay? We're intrinsically motivated. We're motivated by things that change society and that make society a better place or that look after the person next to us. And we spend a lot of time thinking that what we need to do is figure out who, and I'm going to talk about this later and actually contradict myself in some ways here. But what we do is we kind of say, okay, my value proposition is about narrowing the focus down. Okay, so let's really get clear. And so this is where it gets tricky. You've got, let's say you're a drug and alcohol or an alcohol and other drug service, and you're going out to get funding for fundraising because you need to build a new residential centre in Gippsland, for example. And so suddenly you start thinking about, okay, well, the law of marketing says I have to identify those people that think and feel like me. And so I need to really narrow my focus. And what I've seen in the for-purpose sector is often we have our list of 300 or 400 people, and it's just a list, and we know who our top 25 or 30 or 50 donors are, which is great, and the rest is kind of an everybody else. And so we treat everybody pretty much the same, and so we just send out these communications in the hope that people will give to us. And we know that consistently there's the same number of people that will give to us year on year, and it falls into what's called the Pareto principle, which is that 80% of your income will come from 20% of your sources. Okay. what Common Cause have found is actually that you could go and target 150 or 500 people and be reasonably confident that 75% of them share exactly the same values as your organisation and the same values as everybody else around them. So the other flip, or the flip in this research, is that about 75% of us believe that we're intrinsically motivated, but everybody else isn't. And so we approach it from that lens. So we say, well, I'm good. I'm doing the right things. I'm doing the good things. So I need to figure out how to get cut through with those people who don't think like me. I need to figure out the key messaging that's going to cut through someone who is a rationalist or who is, a right-wing ideologue or whatever the case might be. When in actual fact, what their research shows is you can just use your values and communicate around your values and you'll get engagement. The question is, how does that happen? And how strong are your communications to do that? And I'm going to go just a smidge off track. The City of Melbourne, I don't know if anyone saw this, but a few years ago, I think it was, they had price tags on trees in the city. Anyone see that? Does that ring a bell with them? So they'd say, a tree in Flinders Street was worth $21,000, for example. So all of a sudden, it's got a price. So I can come along to the City of Melbourne and say, I want to buy those 10 trees. You've priced them at $2 million for the 10 of them. So here's $2.5 million, you can have a profit. So you've priced something that is far more valuable. And I think this is one of the challenges with organisations when we start communicating is we probably talk a little bit more about what the money will do rather than actually talking about the social impact the money will have, the change the money will have. Okay, I think that's got to be a really clear message going in, is that values that align with our values are what we need to be targeting. Because if I marketed those trees in the city about memories, and I might have a picture of one of you as a child falling out of that tree, that's not purchasable. And to bring it back to brand, if my brand is strong in values, then it's inflexible around the things that we do and how we do them. Okay, it's consistent all the time. And it means that people can attach to us more easily. Because we're all trying to figure out who we are, what we do, what we believe in, why do we believe in that, what's next. Life is all about what do I do next. So that consistency and clarity really helps in terms of getting engagement and getting a deeper understanding of who your organisation is. Excuse me. Just talk amongst yourselves. So this is the tribe. These are the people that look and feel like you that you need to engage with. Okay? That's all tribe building essentially is. Who's like us that we do or don't know? What's our engagement with those people? How strong is that engagement? What is it about our engagement with them that needs to be improved and needs to be made stronger? So archetypes. Does everyone know archetypes? Is it a term that people are familiar with and get it? Some? Okay. Archetypes go way back. Archetypes are probably in the realm of 35,000 years old. Carl Jung and a few others came up with an idea, and Carl Jung is most famous for it, that there is a common collective unconscious in people. And it's built in archetypes, it's built in personalities that we inherently understand. Okay? All of our stories, all of our myths are built around certain types of characters. We have heroes, we have outlaws, we have caregivers, we have magicians. They're all consistent characters in life. Okay? No matter what story you look at, whether you look at Star Wars has a hero, an outlaw, a magician in Obi-Wan Kenobi, What else have we got? There's caregivers. There's the archetypes are intrinsic in human society. And in the 80s, a whole lot of people actually went and did some research around how this applied to marketing, and then rolled it across into marketing and advertising, and worked out that certain brands actually represent certain archetypes. Now, whether they were doing it consciously or not, I don't know, but it was clear in what they were doing. And so they did a whole lot of research around what this looked like. And so there's 12 archetypes. There's actually more. If you go and pick up a book, I was looking at this recently, I found a book by somebody talking about archetypes. They had 37 of them, you know, and there were things like the female jungle warrior and the something else and the something else, and so you can extend them and you can create them in whatever way you want. But for me, this is the simplest representation. And I'm going to say I'm no psychologist, so I've just done this. I've just looked at this from the perspective of how do we tell our story? How do we get people engaged with what we're doing? And from Sky's design perspective, how do we make a difference in the sector in a way that is not only about what we can do with clients, but about how we actually talk and think about ourselves? So there's 12 archetypes. They're broken up into 4 categories. So you've got those that yearn for paradise, those that leave a mark on the world, those that connect with others, and those that provide structure. So each of those, you then have 3, as you can see. The hero, for example, is about mastery. So I'm going to pick out these 3 that are about leaving the mark on the world. It was interesting when we first started doing this work, I had a perception that every organisation we worked with was going to want to be a hero. So far, I think we've had one. I think we've had one hero. We've had caregivers, we've had magicians, we've had a sage. We had one group that we did some work with who didn't want to be a caregiver. So they came back and said, we like the sound of the magician. Can you tell us what that one is? And can you also tell us what the explorer is? Because we want to be that. And so when we actually presented back, so we go through this work, we actually have a survey that we get people to do. And it's pretty simple. It's 10 questions and you can get 100 people to do it. And we'll consolidate it and show you back what it is, what the results are. When we presented back to them, they were pretty clear that no, we're actually a caregiver organisation, but they didn't like the name. So yeah, and we've had an explorer as well. And interestingly, the explorer organisation was a government department that we did this work for. So they're about providing training opportunities for disadvantaged young people through the level crossing removal project. When we started the work with them, they were a sage. That's where they saw themselves because of their training and knowledge base. But actually the results of the survey came back that they were so closely sage and explorer that they decided they wanted to be an explorer, which is about new frontiers and opening up new opportunities for people. And that aligned much more with them as a group of people and the way they thought about what they were doing than just being a pure knowledge organisation. But let's have a look at the leave a mark on the world. So we've got an outlaw, which is about liberation. We've got the magician, which is about power. And we've got a hero, which is about mastery. So the hero proved their worth through courageous and difficult actions. They know where they want to go. They know what the way to do that is and how to do that. And that's what they promote. And that's what they consistently push forward about themselves. And in their view, they are right. And that's the way things should be done. And you should line up behind them. And archetypes have positives and negatives. Okay? So you can go too far into an archetype and become, for example, you can be too far in a hero archetype and become manipulative to get what it is that you want. Okay? So the trick is making sure that you're focused on what the positive attributes are. The magician is about knowledge. The magician is about using what you know and working out how to get win-win solutions for you and your audience. So whether that be your funder who's trying to achieve something or your client. So an alcohol other drug service that we worked with came out as a magician. And it was interesting. We presented a couple of options to them because, again, they were reasonably close. And they just latched on to magician because their whole ethos was about rebuilding lives and trying to change the dynamic for people who are trapped in a cycle of drug dependence. So they saw that their intervention was actually taking all the years of accumulated knowledge and creating a change in that person. And that change might take 10 years, but it was still a critical way that they thought about what they did. And the outlaw is literally about disruption, about being opposed to the status quo or being in revolution with something. I often use Tony Abbott as an outlaw because he's a really good representation of someone who fundamentally believed in what he believed in and to hell with anybody else. And so people who actually aligned themselves with him saw him as a hero, not as an outlaw. For anyone else, he's an outlaw. So these archetypes are perspective-based as well to some extent. Okay? And that's why it's so important that when you start using these, you actually have to make sure you're always on the positive side of them. One of the things we've introduced now into our branding process, because this can be tricky to translate, is a storytelling component. So we work with a guy by the name of Simon Oates, who's an actor and works a lot in corporate storytelling and teaching people how to tell their story. And he comes from this kind of archetype background. And one of the things that he's really big on is getting people together and collecting their stories and then picking a couple out and working out, okay, how do we retell this story through that archetype lens? And then how do we actually train someone to do that? And how do we create that framework so that it can be used going forward? So how do these kind of 3 leave a mark on the world brands translate? Well, we touched on that. Revenge or revolution. Yep. Mastering secret knowledge. Yep. Okay. So this is a Nike ad. Nike is a classic hero brand. Okay, so this is an ad that they put out about one of the athletes that they're supporting.
This is Chris Mosier, gender athlete to make the men's national team. Chris is the first transgender athlete. How'd you know you'd be fast enough to compete against men?
I didn't!
Or strong enough?
I didn't.
Yeah, but how'd you know the team would accept you?
I didn't.
Or that you'd even be allowed to compete?
I didn't.
That must have been tough. Didn't you ever just want to give up?
Yeah, but I didn't.
I'm just going to whip through the 3 of them because we're getting short on time.
There's a killer in here that takes more lives every year than shark attacks. Can you spot it? Every day. Quick as a flash, it's whipped out. Rip currents catch out dozens of people just like you every day. Quick as a flash, you're swept out to sea. And fighting rips just leads to exhaustion and panic. And as you can see, in just a few minutes, you can get swept right out. We're trialling something new that could help save lives. This is Samsung's Pocket Patrol. It uses advanced smartphone technology with augmented reality to help visually identify rip currents. It also brings to life other hidden dangers, such as stingers, shallow sandbanks, and submerged rocks. It's a completely new way for Australians to learn about beach safety. See what I see with Pocket Patrol.
17 countries that share the euro unexpectedly rose in September. The government is at inflation in the 17 countries that share the euro unexpectedly rose in September.
The government is actually the source of our problem. The stimulus is not the solution. The stimulus is why the economy is so messed up in the first place.
If you don't listen to the right word,
I'm asking you to increase that amount.
We got to see that he will bless it. And the
It's all boys and happy earnings tonight. One man is dead and one man is in jail following police dispute early this afternoon on events.
Hollywood's hottest high schoolers are reuniting. They're some of Singletown's hottest teens. And that Samantha shows us two of the stars of High School Musical. The Jersey Shore, groundbreaking. For so many reasons that we can't say on morning TV, but here's one that we can mention.
In fact, one of their executives a number of years ago is quoted as saying, I'm going to actually read this, "What we sell is the ability for a 43-year-old accountant to dress in black leather, ride through small towns and have people afraid of him." Nothing more outlawish than that. Okay, so you've got a handle on all of this stuff around who you are, what you do, mission, why, who, archetypes, etc. You've been running with it, and now you want to measure actually how strong is your brand out there. These are the 4 simple drivers for measuring brand equity and brand strength. So how much trust is there out in your community about you? Whether that be in your professional partnerships, whether that be with funders in the local community. What are the partnerships that you have? Are they growing? Are they strong? Do you feel like you're an equal partner in those partnerships? If you're the lead agent in those partnerships, are you delivering on what it is you're meant to be delivering on? Are you consistent in everything that you say and do? And do you have a clear focus on what your mission is? And these are actually a little bit circular. So if you have strong trust in the community, more people will want to partner with you. Your partnerships will be stronger because you will be consistent in what you say and do, and people will see that. Because of that consistency, you'll have partnerships, people will have trust, and the focus on mission means that people will always know what you're there for. Okay? Because fundamentally, as we go back to that purpose hierarchy triangle, mission is everything to our sector and our organisations. It drives everything that we do and everything that we try to achieve. So it's got to be critical to brand, and it's actually got to be critical in the conversation about brand in your organisations and how it plays out in all of your strategic decision-making processes. I think that's it. That's it. Thank you.